Hi everyone, so I'm Kay. If you've not met me before, Kay Sidebottom. I'm based at Leeds Beckett University. This course is kind of nothing to do with Leeds Beckett really, but that's where I'm affiliated to, and you might know me through my role there. But I've been thinking for a long time about anti-fascist education, and it feels more pertinent as time goes on to really look at this. And so I thought it'd be great to get some people together who have an interest in this area and just see what we can come up with. My role, I think, is one of perhaps a sort of provocateur. I'm hoping to maybe throw some ideas at you, some things to read, but I'm not positioning myself as an expert. There are many people in the Discord space who will have lots of knowledge of this stuff, so that's fantastic. And I think we've got probably around 50 people potentially joining this this journey, and let's see what we can do. Let's see what we can get out of it. Rosie Braidotti, who is a big thinker who I admire very much, often says that the first thing fascists sees is the curriculum. And as time goes on, it feels more pertinent to have these discussions. Just today, if you've been watching the news, the reports that have come out into the inquiries into sort of racism in the country, that there's some really worrying developments. And I think as a result of that and the other things that are going on around us at the moment, the time is really now to see what can emerge really. And I've called this first month April Flowers. I was just outside looking at the kind of diversity, the range of flowers that are coming through this time of year. And nature is all about difference. And of course, fascism is very much the opposite. It's all about uniformity. So I thought that might be a nice theme to introduce the course and for us to think through together. So in this video, I'm just going to talk through a few ideas that I've had, maybe a few ways that we could run this, but also thinking and being really open to the ideas that you have. As I say, there are people here with lots of expertise, and I'm really happy for this to go in any direction that you choose. So this is another Braidotti quote. I promise I won't bang on about Braidotti all the way through, but I particularly like this. Collective assemblage to redefine what we're capable of becoming. Oh yes, that is the project. And a collective assemblage is perhaps what we will become. It's not affiliated, it's quite nomadic, it moves around, people can join, people can leave. I'm really interested in things that work outside of organisational hierarchies and what that does in terms of power and potential to make change happen. So we're a loose affiliation, I think, of perhaps people who are coming with a shared values base. So hopefully this opportunity will also be a chance for people to get to know each other and to sort of explore all the different kind of worlds and settings that you work in. I've drawn quite a lot on the work of Umberto Eco in terms of my thinking about anti-fascism so far, and I've put some references at the end of the kind of things you might like to read, but this feels particularly pertinent to me. That fascism can come back under the most innocent of disguises. Our duty is to uncover it and to point our finger at any of its new instances every day in every part of the world. And I like to think that perhaps this is what we'll be doing here. I'm not sure the disguises are that innocent at the moment. They feel quite overt to me and more explicit as time goes on. But nevertheless, there are things that perhaps we accept quite readily that we might want to step back and re-examine together, perhaps in our own contexts or perhaps the kind of things that we're seeing in the systems around us. So do, during the course of this, have a think and perhaps question yourself your own kind of relationships to power as well. I'm going to go through a few suggestions, I think, for how we might do this. And as I say, I'm really open to ideas and I don't want to be too prescriptive. I'm interested in whether this experience that we have together could be a form of anti-fascist education in itself, actually, in the way that it runs and in the way that we communicate and so on. And as a result of that, one of the things I want to think about a lot is my own relationship to power. How much need do I feel to control this process? And that's probably going to challenge me quite a lot, which is always a healthy thing. But I'm very keen on co-production. The idea that there is no need to involve yourself to any degree. It's really up to you how much you want to take part, what activities you want to do. Bearing in mind that we're in the middle of a pandemic, people don't have much time, work pressures are becoming huge for many people. So this is really very free. And I think this idea of whoever's here is the right people is really important. It might be that you can do some thinking and discussion one month, but perhaps not the next, and that's absolutely fine. You can join or leave at any time. But certainly bring your own knowledge, bring your own histories, your own experiences. I know that some people in the group have direct experience of anti-fascist education. So bring those things, please do tell us and share the things that you want to share. Take the course in whatever direction you want. I like to think that this is a rhizomatic experience. So if you have a look at the crazy root system pictured here, that's an example of a rhizome where things can connect to any disparate things. Things can start and end anywhere. Things can go in all kinds of directions. There's no linear progression necessarily here. And you might want to share things outside of what we're working on. You might want to tweet, write your own blogs, anything like that. It's an open-ended experience. I will share materials and readings, and hopefully others will too. And I've also set up a Padlet site where I thought we could have a go each month at some kind of creative activity. One of the things that I'm always quite keen on bringing in is sort of art-based ways of exploring a topic, and that might be art in whatever form that takes for you. It could be something quite physically creative, or it could just be different in that you might be working outside and thinking in the outdoor space, or it could be writing, if you love to write. So have a think about that, whatever kind of helps you get to new insights in a sort of interdisciplinary way. So I'll share the Padlet, and I've got an initial activity that we could have a look at together for this month, and then hopefully ideas will emerge as we go along. I called the Padlet and I called the Discord site pro-social pedagogies. And the reason I did that was because one of the things, and it's a slight kind of warning, I suppose, is that often when I talk about anti-fascist beliefs or action online, that there's a very quick kind of backlash against that. I've had quite a bit of trolling before from people from the far right and so on. So just a slight warning, I suppose, for you if you're getting involved in this, that could be something just to be aware of, actually. So the Discord social media platform that I thought we could use to discuss things together is actually called Pro-Social Pedagogies. But that also relates to the way in which I thought we could work together as a group. A few principles which are drawn from Nancy Kline's thinking environment, which you may be familiar with. The first one, as I mentioned previously, whoever's here are the right people. Never quite sure whether the syntax is right there, but whoever's here are the right people. So it might be that it's just me and one other person chatting. Hope not, but that would actually be okay. It might be a whole gang of us one month and perhaps not the next, and so on. So we're all equal as thinkers within this space. And that idea of hierarchy not kind of being a thing. Some of us may have vast amounts of experience in one area, others may not, and again, that's absolutely fine. That's really fruitful. Be present as yourself. It's you that we need. If one of the key principles of anti-fascist pedagogy is the celebration and promotion of difference, then it's really important that we enact that, I think, in everything we do. So show up absolutely as yourself. And the last one there, names matter. And again, you might think that's quite a sort of minor point, but people's names are important. Learn each other's names and use names if you can. One of the first things I'd like us to do is just have a think about how we want to work together, bearing in mind that thing about be present as yourself, what works for you. And so I've set up on Discord a space for us to create a bit of a group agreement. And it begins with the opening sentence, I would really like it if, and I'll just invite you to add your own responses to that question. There's some examples here of the kind of things that students often say when I run this and when we create a group agreement within a class group. So things like we bring our own experiences and ideas. If we're doing live work together, we don't have to have cameras on. If we're invited to answer things, we don't, put people on the spot. And then I think the last one, quite interesting, we explore but don't prescribe certain forms of practice. So again, being very open, I think, to different ideas around pedagogy. But those are just examples, and I'm sure there'll be things that you can think of in relation to how you want us to work together. And I've used the phrase here, a shift from safety to protection, which is really thinking about how we can be responsible for each other in a kind of understanding of humans being interdependent and relational. And I've drawn on some Indigenous ideas and philosophies around that. The quote on the left-hand side of the screen here is from Tyson Yunkaporta, who says that there's no such thing as safety in Aboriginal worldviews. It places people in a passive role at the mercy of authorities who may or may not intervene, but we have plenty of words for protection. So I think often in education we say that we're creating a safe space, and I'm never sure that that is absolutely true, because how do we know for each individual what safety means and how safe things actually can be? So my suggestion for our group is that we move to this sense of protection. How can we protect both ourselves and each other within a learning environment? And again, that might be something you want to have a think about. The last kind of principle, if you like, is this idea of thinkers as our friends. And so theorists, who no doubt will draw on, again, this idea of kind of taking people down from the pedestal a little bit. So we'll engage with lots of thinkers, I'm sure, along the way, but not in terms of someone who is kind of glorified or out of reach in some way. I think let's bring those people in, let's kind of unpick what they have to say, critique them if we need to, and put them on our level, because we're all thinkers, we're all philosophers here within this space. So one of the things I was thinking about when I decided it would be great to explore this topic with other people is the rather tricky discourse around at the moment around what fascism is and whether or not what we see around us is fascist. And you could have this discussion for a very long time. People argue about it quite a lot. Often things are called neo-fascism, or you might hear it being talked about as populism, for example. This has been going around for a long time, particularly around Donald Trump and his actions in America. And so I think it's quite important to maybe not come up with, a definition and not enter too far into that debate. You might disagree with me, and if we want to discuss it, then that's absolutely fine. But I'm thinking that for certain members of the group, this could be painful. It could be very pertinent for people who have direct experience or generational history regarding fascism. And so what I find quite helpful is to think instead about some of the kind of defining characteristics. So the list of 14 here is drawn from Lawrence Britt's work, kind of 14 common features that have emerged in fascist regimes. And Umberto Eco's work as well, which I will refer you to, which talks about this idea of fascism, so kind of, fascism recurring in different places and different ways. At the end of the slides, I've included a link to a really good discussion with the author Timothy Snyder. This was on BBC Hard Talk. And thanks to John Diamond for pointing me in the direction of that. But Timothy Snyder unpicks this conversation. It's a really interesting chat that he has. And he talks about how it's more useful perhaps to look at patterns. And so we can learn from the patterns in history that we've seen where fascism is concerned, and particularly the kind of groundwork, the pre-fascism, where things start to emerge. What can we learn when we see those patterns? And so he says we have to be careful how we use the word, but also careful not to ignore that phenomenon, because history teaches us where, these things have happened before. And instead we should look for the ways we're similar to the 1920s and 30s and cut them off before they become more dangerous. So that idea of identifying, kind of exploring, recognising, I think perhaps what's going on, it might be a foundational principle that we could work with. For the various months of the project, and I've suggested difference and uniformity for this first month, but one of the other topics I would quite like to look at is this idea of power and micro-fascism. And so Foucault, in his introduction to Anti-Oedipus, the Deleuze and Guattari book, said that the strategic adversary is fascism, the fascism in us all, in our heads and in our everyday behaviour. The fascism that causes us to love power, to desire the very thing that dominates and exploits us. So Foucault and Deleuze actually were very interested in the fact that fascist leaders need fascist followers. And so we all are susceptible in some way or another. So I thought one month it would be really interesting to explore power in this way in regards to ourselves and our own relationship to power. And I think in education, we will all have probably felt the buzz, perhaps, of holding power, of wielding power in some way, and to think about what that means, how that has affected us, how that has perhaps affected us, the children around us. As parents, again, as well, no doubt will have experienced those kind of powerful moments. And these ideas of different forms of power, potestas, which is the kind of hierarchical, formal, policy, governmental sort of power as usual, and what that looks like, as opposed to potentia, which is power as the rhizome, power as hope, affirmation, kind of natural power, power as relationality and collaboration, and how we can perhaps shift our mindset or recognise where those types of power are enacted and what that means in terms of anti-fascist behaviour and anti-fascist education. The other great thinker that I would like to introduce you to, if you're not familiar with, and we have some experts in the group who know much more than I do about Reggio Emilia, is Loris Malaguzzi, and I apologise for my Italian pronunciation there. But Malaguzzi began the Reggio Emilia network of municipal schools in northern Italy, and this was after the Second World War, looking at what anti-fascist education could be, and very specifically calling it that as well. It was a deliberate attempt to create educational systems that were anti-fascist. And so there are a number of principles connected with this, one of those being very much about the celebration of difference within the child. And Reggio Emilia as a system is mainly focused on younger children, particularly early years. You may have heard of the nursery schools that we have in this country that are based on the same principles. And it was around this idea that children have infinite ways to express themselves. So the infinite ways that children can express, explore, and connect their thoughts, feelings, and imaginings. And the poem, The 100 Languages of Children, was Malaguzzi's sense of kind of exploring how many ways children can, in fact, interact and learn about the world, and how limiting normal education systems can be. So the child has 100 languages and 100 more, but they steal 99. The school and the culture separate the head from the body. They tell the child to discover the world already there. They tell the child that work and play, reality and fantasy, science and imagination, sky and earth, reason and dream are things that do not belong together. And if you're experiencing the English educational system as it exists at the moment, or, you've been brought up through it, you'll probably recognise, I think, perhaps that sense that, many of the languages of children are removed as they're put through very functional procedures and a standardised testing regime. And one of the things I'm really interested, perhaps when we explore Reggio Emilia further, is how we can perhaps shift from a focus on the younger child through to older children and also adults, because adult education, of course, is as much subject to instrumentalism, functionality, as it is for younger children. Most focus, I think, for adults at the moment, when we talk about adult ed, is around English, maths, employability and IT. And so I think ways to extend this into other sectors of education, these principles of Malaguzzi would be really interesting to look at. So that would be a really interesting focus, I think, of our work. And if you're familiar, more so than I am, I'm sure, with Reggio Emilia, then do please share your experiences and tell us all about it. So the turn to difference and the first appeal, I think, of a fascist or prematurely fascist movement is an appeal against intruders. That's what we've seen, this idea of othering, of having some kind of common enemy, and so on. And so this fear of difference is kind of intrinsic within fascist regimes. And so this is something that we can recognise, I think, certainly within our own political systems at the moment. If you look at, for example, the way the Home Office treats refugees and asylum seekers, if you look at the new police bill and the proposals in there around gypsies and travellers. So this fear of difference, I think, is very, very real and runs through education, of course, as well. So one of the things I'm really interested in is this idea of how we can turn towards difference instead of away from it. And this quote here by Clive Stagall: difference in itself releases difference from domination by identity and sameness. So this idea of celebrating difference just for itself rather than assimilation or inclusion into some kind of standard human. By destabilising our thinking, disrupting our faculties and freeing our senses from established tendencies, we can uncover the difference evident in the lived world and realise the uniqueness of each moment and thing. And how can we do that? What does that feel like? What happens when we are in an educational space that really values difference? How is that brought to life? These are questions that I'd be really interested in your responses to. So in this first month, I'm going to invite you to put something onto the Padlet, and you can be creative as you want with this. It could be a photograph, it could be a drawing, a sketch, a doodle. If you're not a good drawer, then photos are brilliant. Photos are fine, things that you see around you. It might be that you want to write. This is an example of a poem that I did in response to this, but it could be a blog, it could be a longer piece, whatever works for you. But really exploring these ideas of difference and uniformity in education, as I say, how they manifest, how they feel, how we can move more towards the celebration of 100 languages, whatever those 100 languages might be. So I've put the link to the Padlet site on Discord. Hopefully you'll be able to find that okay, and just go for it. Just post things on there. Let's see what we can come up with. This is what it looks like. I've called it Anti-Fascist Education, and this is our project for the month, to explore difference and uniformity and to share some kind of visual or written response to that stimulus. So hopefully that's given you a few things to think about. I'm worried already that I'm being way too controlling, but part of Reggio Emilia, some of the principles of the education is to have a pedagogista, who is someone who is a philosophical provocateur who maybe throws questions in and challenges teachers. They might work on a regional basis. They might go around different schools and kind of like a CPD activity for educators. They might come in and encourage philosophical questioning, deeper thinking about practice and about values. So hopefully that's kind of the role I'm trying to emulate here. So yeah, next steps. Do introduce yourself on Discord. Hopefully you got into it okay and it makes sense as a platform. Add your thoughts to the group agreement space in there and anything else you would like to discuss. I've posted a few readings already, but again, add to that if there's things that you would like to share. Have a go at the Padlet activity, 100 languages, thinking about difference and uniformity as a theme, and share any thoughts that you have on the topic of that in Discord as well. Few references to follow up. I will make sure that I share the slides so you can read these things. If there's anything you can't get hold of, if you haven't got institutional access to any journal articles or anything like that, then please just ask me. I'm always happy to find things and to share them with you. Really excited that you're here. And as I say, do tell me if I'm being too bossy, and do feel free to do as you will with this space over the coming months. And hopefully I will speak to you soon. Bye for now.